This episode is brought to you by Rescue Intelitech, innovating solutions to keep firefighters safe. Their Solo Rescue Decon Washer helps reduce cancer risks by cleaning contaminated gear quickly and effectively. Learn more at rescueintelitech.com because clean gear saves lives.
At the Fire Store, you'll find everything but the truck, helmets, boots, turnout gear, and more that you can count on. Shop now at thefirestore.com.
Hi, Chris McLoone here. Welcome to this episode of Talking Trucks. As always, my guest for this show is Ricky Riley, and we're going to be talking today a little bit about a trend that I'm hoping I didn't misidentify, but there does seem to be a trend, regardless of everything else that's going on in apparatus purchasing right now, to designing, and most of the time when I'm thinking of this, I'm thinking of pumpers, but I'm sure it applies to aerials as well. But really designing fire trucks, pumpers or aerials to more, I guess, be, I want to say more mission oriented, maybe, than parade oriented, which is a not a great way of putting it, but just they're being built more practically and more for the work that they are being asked to do versus the look as they're doing the work. And Ricky, thanks for joining me today as always. And I guess that's where I'd like to start. You not this year, but in recent years, you've had an FDIC class called building trucks to do work, which is kind of along those lines. And I guess first, is that, am I way off on that? Or, when you get out and you do consulting, you've been up my way to do some consulting. Are you noticing that there seems to be more of a trend currently toward building these things to be more mission oriented and to really be thinking about how they're going to function at the fire ground versus maybe how they're going to look, or even building some monstrosity that's designed to do absolutely everything? So I asked too many questions there, but am I wrong? Are you seeing that as well?
I think what I'm seeing, and once again, I'm looking at a small slice of the industry or the purchasing in my geographic area, but I do think I see a lot more committees that are led by younger people. And I think that has an impact on what kind of fire truck they buy, because, the older members of a committee, older, organizational infrastructure there is, hey, we bought this truck and it did well. Let's buy another one just like it. Let's buy another one just like it. And, the men and women that are particularly riding those rigs may not like that design, but it's forced on them by the administration or by this committee that isn't really riding fire trucks anymore. And look, I don't ride fire trucks anymore, but I will listen all day long to what the people that are riding them. And my committees are made up of that to ensure that we're not building a fire truck that is out of touch with reality. And watching, the last couple that I've been involved with as a consultant, it's interesting to watch that younger generation design the rig based on the function in their geographic area, for their response area, for how they deliver their service to their community each and every day. It's not based on how New York's doing it, how LA's doing it, how Houston's doing it. It's based on how they do it. And even demoing some rigs there with them, we set it up and then we do it in like their little downtown. Then we start to outside the downtown, start, where the setbacks are a little farther, if we're talking about a ladder truck, and just keep going out and out. And then, as they get into the rural areas or the more suburban, how's that truck going to operate there? And, so they're thinking about a lot of that stuff where, I think older apparatus committees sometimes shut themselves down to these new ideas. And look, the manufacturers are hitting us, regardless of who it is, with newer ways to design pumpers, newer way to design aerials, new technology. And look, I'm not anti-technology, but I don't want the whole thing to be, gee whizzed out and, not be tested. And I think a lot of those people on these younger committees, I think they saw a lot of this gee whiz stuff fail on fire apparatus. And it's not the fire apparatus manufacturer's fault or and stuff like that. But, everybody's going to try to keep pushing forward. I mean, we still can't have steamers and we still can't have horse-drawn fire apparatus today. So we have to keep moving that needle forward. But, sometimes we falter on some new technology, and that's okay. We can falter it. I don't want to be the company that buys the truck that it falters on. I'd much rather hear about it and go, hey, I'm not going to buy that. But I think, they want to get back to a more simpler rig and how it works in their community. It's, we can't buy a New York City ladder truck and go, oh, we're going to plop it down here in suburbia and it's going to work. It's just not, it just isn't. It's going to work in New York City. That's why they have such great specifications and work for them. But I certainly have seen that trend. And I think it's based, like I said before, on the youth of the committees. And I think the youth being able to be on that committee. That means somebody that's higher up understands the need for them to be on that committee. They have a voice. And then they, if it's like a volunteer fire department or something like that, the committee allows them to have that speaking voice. And that's how we attract that. I think, Nick, Wilbur and you and I had this conversation about fire trucks. And, if they don't feel like they have a voice or a say in it, they'll go find another firehouse. They'll go find another place to volunteer. I mean, where I'm at is a lot of transient fire departments. Unlike, your neck of the woods where, where you live is where you protect. I mean, that's not always not the case for a lot of suburban areas or the areas right outside those big cities where there may be combination departments or volunteer departments where, they go, well, I don't like what this fire department's doing. I'm going to go to this next fire department because they're listening to the members. They're listening to the people that are riding the apparatus. So I think that trend is moving forward. We're not building these huge monstrosities or anymore. I love seeing the compact aerials that are coming out from different manufacturers. Not these huge behemoth pieces of apparatus. I've even seen them going back down to single axle, which when we were dependent on drum brakes all the time for that. It was not a good thing with the weight. But I would certainly say the advance in braking systems and axles have certainly kind of brought that around. So it's a good thing. And you're observing correctly. So that was a very long answer to you're observing correctly, Chris, but you were observing correctly.
Well, no, but I think that you brought up a pretty important point, and it is one that you've brought up before. I saw you at a conference a number of years ago now where you were talking about empowering those, not necessarily younger firefighters, but empowering the people that ride them every day to help make those decisions. But I think even more important than that, the first thing you said was that there are a lot of younger firefighters, running the committees. But I do think that there is also a fair amount, and you mentioned it, of maybe the committee chair is a little older, but he or she is listening to the people and, taking advisement from the people who are riding these trucks every day. And it's interesting. It's weird sometimes. You've been in this business for a while. I've been in the business for 32 years now as a volunteer. But it does seem sometimes like it has, with this, it almost hasn't been gradual. It's been almost like a flip, like there was a massive turnover at one point in the last, say, 10 or 15 years where, there was some kind of gap in recruitment or something, but sometimes it seems like there was like a major change that led to something like this, personnel wise. I don't know. I could be missing on that one as well, but I do think that the key though is the leadership listening, and no matter what the age of the group is. But I do also think that there's a lot to be said for those for the younger members operating them. And that we could start to see a lot more of the pump control systems being fewer fewer physical valves that you see and more push button or touch screen. We could end up seeing that because there is a comfort level with those things today with our younger, but I say younger, Ricky, but these men and women are like 28, 29 into their mid 30s, they're not young like just 18 or 19 coming into.
Well, I mean, those people are young to me, Chris. I don't know about you, but they're young to me.
Well, yeah. Well, they're closer to me in age than I often think. You know what I mean? Because when you say young, I'm always thinking I'm thinking of my kids. I do think.
I mean, most of the organizations that I've been a member of, and I will go back to even like Kentland, that department, when I joined that in the 80s, the membership that rode the apparatus is what ran the department, as opposed to a lot of volunteer corporations where the corporation tries to run the membership that ride the apparatus. So the membership isn't empowered. They're not the major speaking voice, and when I say it, so I mean it's the fire department shouldn't be run by the bingo hall or the social hall or the group that doesn't ride fire trucks, doesn't come to drills or anything like that. And there's a lot of fire departments that are like that, and this one wasn't. So how they bought apparatus, and before I got there, as I got there, they were buying rigs, and obviously I got involved in their apparatus purchases, but it was all based on everybody that went out other than the person that wrote the check rode fire trucks. And that's the way it was, is that they're the ones that are going to decide how they're going to sit, where things are going to be mounted, how the cross lays are going to be, how the front bumper lines are going to be, what are we going to spend money on, what is not important to us. And that was that part. And look, I see departments now where there is almost zero volunteer participation, and it's an accommodation system, and you still have the corporation trying to dictate how the fire truck gets bought rather than the riding members, whether it be career members or a very minute number of volunteers that may not put the time in. But that is, once again, not listening to that core group. And everything they say is not perfect, even though they are the main person to ride the apparatus. But if you can't open your ears and open your eyes, and look, I may shut down ideas on more than one occasion, and then go back a day later and go, "Yep, that probably is a good idea." Just because I need to think about it, I need to marinate over it and go, "Yeah, that probably was a good idea. I probably shut that one down a little too quickly." But there's through standardization, through understanding mechanical portions of the apparatus, that's a big piece. And go, is it really that bad? Whatever they wanted, and is it something that everybody wants, or is it just one person on the committee, wants this widget put on the fire truck and nobody else wants it? And then they're the most, you always get that vocal person on the committee that just starts running off at the mouth and everything. But is it, an all around, does the committee vote on? That's why, I said, the committee should always be an odd number. So when there's a vote, you're always going to get a decision, so as we go through that stuff. But, that's what I loved about Kentland. And I'm sure they're not the only fire department in the entire country that does it like that. So for all the, all the haters out there, but it's just, I was very impressed by that, and has always kind of stuck with me. That they always bought apparatus, designed apparatus based on the majority of the people that ride the apparatus, and not the corporation of the fire department that judges that. So
that's one of my favorite terms, actually, is to say phrases is, let me cogitate on that. That's because
cogitate,
because not only do I not want to shoot something down too quickly, I also want to make sure that if I do ultimately decide, no, this is not a direction I want to go, that I can articulate that properly instead of just saying no. You know what I mean? I want to make sure that I have my reasoning, squared away. But let me cogitate on that. They hear it here at work a lot, where, I'll be getting hit with ideas and I'll be like, well, okay, hold on. I'm not saying no, but let me just think about this for a little bit to make sure I can apply it here.
Well, I'm glad you cogitate, because I've been in some of those meetings with some of those people, and I understand your pain.
When we talk about defining what a practical rig is, let's just say like a pumper. What do you, in your mind, what is a practical pumper consist of? I guess if you're out there, you come up here to Weldon Fire Company, and we're like, we want to build something that is more practical than what we have out there right now. What's the? I mean, it's going to be different for everybody because of geographic areas. But what are some of those things they have to be hitting on in order to build what will be a practical truck for them?
I mean, it's mission definement is the first thing. Is that you have to sit there and go, what is our mission, and what is this truck's mission, and what do we really want to do with the truck? And whether it be Weldon, whether it be Kentland, whether it be somewhere in Texas or somewhere in Montana, is that you sit down and go, what do we want this truck to do? What is our mission for that truck, and is it realistic? Like you said earlier, you kind of glazed over. Was it, we trying to buy an all-in-one fire truck, which really never seems to work, but with diminishing staffing levels, diminishing volunteers, that may be the only truck we get out. So, for us, we would design an engine that's not going to carry a fan. But, in your fire department or whoever's fire department, they may need to build in a way to carry the fan, because they might not get a truck out. They might not get a special service or a rescue squad out. What else do you need to carry on that particular rig? Is it rural water supply? Is it extrication tools? Any kind of thing. And that kind of builds your fire truck out. What kind of size it needs to be, I think. And then, what size motor do we need to put in it? So all these things that we talk about, building apparatus to do work, is that we have to start with that mission definement and then go, okay, so we want to carry X amount of pounds of equipment, and we should be able to obtain that now through vendors' websites and everything like that. There's a lot of information on there about how much a hydraulic tool weighs, or how much a DeWalt, 9-inch circular saw with a battery weighs, because, that is information now that is required by us in NFPA 1900 to give to the manufacturer, so they can calculate that into the apparatus weights, when we start asking for turning radiuses and, the tilt table and all this sort of stuff. And then how we're going to outlay it on the apparatus is important also. So, I mean, all these practical pieces now, if we stay with an engine, is the pump correct? How many GPM do we need to pump? Obviously I'm a big single stage person. I think 2 stages are archaic. Regardless of how many GPMs you need to pump. Obviously, I would imagine, as I've never really looked at an industrial pumper other than to marvel at the number of intakes and discharges. Is it a 2-stage pump, and how many GPMs? I mean, they're 3,000, 4,000 GPM pumpers, but for our everyday fire department, is it how many GPMs do we want to pump? And then the next, for us, it would be we talk about the title for this thing, building practical apparatus. Is it a linkage valve or is it an electric valve? And which is easier for you and your fire department to fix? I mean, I can get a bunch of older members that can fix linkage all day long. I mean, going and buying cotter pins and everything else, I can do that at Napa, as opposed to going, hey, I have to buy an actuator from the manufacturer of that valve, and I got to call them. They got to ship it. How long is it going to take to be shipped? And how long is that discharge, or even the truck out of service? And then the next thing is, even when we talked about, when I was in Florida, was, the engine is there for water. So how many ways can we take water in, and then how many ways can we put water out, and how you want to do that? So, it was a matter of, we have, the 2 short suction tubes on each side. Can we take water in the front? Can we take water, from a rear intake? How do we adapt those to take it different ways? So, how do we draft if we're in a rural water supply from the front? How do we do it from the sides? There's, obviously you're, the other group that you have on with you, fire apparatus, your rural water supply experts, they have some nifty things that they can do. But did you think about that when you're building your fire truck? It's what kind of valve are you putting on the side intakes that is going to help facilitate that? So so how much water can we take in the truck? And then how are we going to distribute that water out? And how many attack lines do you need? How many large lines do you need? Are you going to flow like a portable monitor? Do you have a deck pipe? So all these kind of pieces kind of go into that, and then how simplistic it is to pump. I'm not sold on those systems yet. That I feel like you could have an Xbox controller to pump it. But I think the Navy, even talking about the Navy earlier before we even got on, is that I've seen articles where they're buying controllers that the kids are used to operating, and they're not used to a pump boss or a pressure control valve. But I bet you put that controller in there and put pressure, and all that sort of stuff on that controller, they're going to figure it out. Now, I don't know how well that's going to work, but there are systems out there, and I don't know how well they've been placed in urban areas and tested. But once again, that's a dangerous thing. I mean, I look at the fire truck that I first went to with Dick Young, may he rest in peace, designed with all these electric valves, and it was just a hot mess. But he started the electric valve trend, and that trend is still here. It's just not as prevalent as it was thought to be, but it's a big deal. So I mean, all these kind of things kind of go that, and then that extends to aerials, extends to rescue trucks, mission definement, and then we build our fire truck around mission definement. And then how simplistic you want to make it is entirely up to you and your organization. It is not up to Chris and Ricky to determine how easy you want that fire truck to pump, or how the aerial gets off the rig, or how many ground ladders you're going to take off, and how many discharges you're going to have. That's entirely up to you. So that as we look at the rigs coming out of the shops today, or the recent deliveries, and I scour those probably just as much as you scour them. It certainly seems that the behemoth fire trucks that we know with 10-man cabs and huge pump panels, and they were 35, 40 feet long. I think those are all kind of going out the door. One, probably because of cost, and two, just fire departments are listening to the membership that is riding their rigs. And once again, with the downturn of staffing for volunteers, and look, staffing is not a problem just for volunteers. It is a problem for career departments. Also, trying to hire enough people to ride all their apparatus. So, why do I need 6 seats in the back of a fire truck when I'm only going to have 4 people or 3 people riding it, and give me more room for EMS equipment, or, metering, or something that needs to be inside the cab. So I know that's a long answer to the question, but
well, do you so it sounds like, I mean, you're sounds like you're saying that this is a signal of changing times in general versus being a fad, or versus being something that is addressing the current apparatus purchasing atmosphere, which I don't really want to get into too much, because there are other ways, that people are trying to figure out how to address costs and lead times and things like that. But I think the concept of what they're building, that is probably more a sign of changing times and trends in apparatus design. It should be interesting to see where it goes, in another 15 years. But for right now, this is definitely something that and it is interesting to me because it does seem to be a trend, and it does seem to be nationwide. So it's not just a pocket of departments in one section of the country that's looking to do this. It's something that has really caught on. And I mean, and I count my fire company in that as well. I know we took delivery of a couple of rigs back in 2021. And I love driving the one. I mean, it's a nimble little truck that, not little, but that we put, thought into. But, and I'm sorry, I'm probably going to get off into a little bit of a tangent here. It does fall in line with what you said in terms of defining the mission, and, figuring out different aspects of that and what you're willing to give up. I mean, we gave up a little bit of water in order to have a little lower of a hose bed and a little shorter of a width. Not a lot of water, but just a little bit. So the tank on that one is slightly smaller, but it is more nimble. It is able to get around some of the some of the trickier parts of our township a little easier than, say, the truck that it replaced. So there is, I mean, really defining that mission first. There are certain things that, forever, and if my deputy chief watches this, he'll laugh, because I mean, I'll forever be against some of the stuff that they did. But at the same time, I'm just Chris, I'm just one guy, who's driving this thing, in a driving staff of probably 10 to 15 people. Certainly those who drive more calls than I do during the year. So anyways, would you, I'm sorry, so now I'll get to the question, but would you say that is more an indication of times changing in general versus trying to get a rig quicker, or would you say that beyond everything that's going on right now, this is definitely something that is a sign of maybe some changing times in general when it comes to rig design?
Well, I think it's a little both. I think that, I love my full custom pumper, for instance. But there's ways, with these programs that the manufacturers are coming at us with. It's just not limited to one particular manufacturer. I mean, there's more. These program trucks is what we call them. Whereas, we limit the amount of options, we limit the amount of things that you can do, and that makes what the manufacturer thinks is a practical truck. It's quick, it's out the door, it can pump water, it can, the ladder comes out of the bed. You may not get everything that you want in your rig as opposed to fully custom, but hey, I'm going to get it to you in a shorter time frame. So they've kind of put this, the committee members into a box with, hey, I can get you, for instance, in 4 years, or I can get it to you in 2 years. Which do you want? And, everybody's going to go, I want the 2 year. Well, here are the things you're going to have to sacrifice. And, is it really something that you're sacrificing that's detrimental to your response area or detrimental to your operation, or is it just a minor inconvenience? And that's certainly something you have to ask each and every time you go out. But I think the manufacturers now, like even my hometown in Ocean City, Maryland, I mean, that they bought fully customized trucks since I was, knee high. And, now they're buying program trucks to fulfill their need for their community, because they have trucks that are aged out, and, they didn't get everything they wanted, but it's a darn good fire truck. I think the committee, I wasn't involved in it, so, but the committee did an excellent job of speccing it out, staying below the number of options that the manufacturer limited them to, and then delivered a fire truck that's going to protect, my family, members of my family, and they're, perfectly. I don't think any fire truck shows up at somebody's house and the homeowner goes, yeah, I just don't know about this program truck. This doesn't look like a full custom. All they see is hose coming off, ladders coming off, and firefighters coming off. And as long as you can achieve all that, it's a good thing. And, but once again, New York City, LA, Houston, these big departments, I'd say Washington, D.C., even myself, we have a set way that we buy these apparatus, and it's based on our years of listening to our members, years of understanding our operational needs, and then understanding our mechanical needs. And then how are we going to get those parts? So it's a much different world in Weldon, where you're from, when the fire truck breaks, as opposed to when mine breaks. The dynamic things, it's dynamic difference. Was like, we're under pressure to get the rig back in service because, hey, we don't have 3 rigs sitting in that firehouse to go, oh, we'll just switch into another one. Which you can do in Weldon, and there's hundreds and thousands of communities that can do that. If one fire truck's out of service in their volunteer firehouse, they can just switch in another one and not miss a beat. Where that comes into play. I mean, when we talk about practical trucks, and Mike Wilbur and Tom Shadd are going to love this when I say it, is that this blacked out thing is still killing me, man. It's just, I just don't see how practical that is. I mean, if you're going to buy a practical fire truck, and then you're going to buy blacked out rims and blacked out stuff, and they look phenomenal. I mean, I don't say they don't look great, but how practical that is to get that replaced is beyond me. But you never know. I mean, maybe the headlight bezel people are, stocking blacked out bezel pieces, as long as it's the right color or the right shade or the right texture that goes on with that sort of stuff. So as long as we see practical rigs, there's still a little impracticability going on out there. Impracticability, I think that's a word. That goes on out there. But once again, we are who we are in the American Fire Service, and we all love our fire trucks. Otherwise, there would be no talking truck show. There would be no FDIC floor. If we didn't love our fire trucks and love how they look and how they go out there in the world. So it's not a condemning the people that love their blacked out stuff. It's just that when we talk about the practical part, is the part that gets to me from a fleet perspective, not from I don't think any of these blacked out parts and pieces have an operational detriment on your fire ground. It's just from a fleet perspective. So,
gotcha. Well, we covered a lot here today. We could probably cover a bunch more, and I encourage anyone who has a thought on this or wants us to cover a different aspect of what we talked about on the show to let us know. The easiest way is to get in touch with me, chris.mccloon@clarionevents.com. But before I let you go, Ricky, any general comments on what we talked about? Any final words on building this trend that we both recognize as building more practical vehicles for the mission that we are charged with, which is saving lives and property from destruction by fire.
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to go into stuff with an open mind anymore. I as a committee members, as a fire department, is to go in and listen to what the manufacturers are trying to give us. Look, it's not easy for a manufacturer, regardless of name, to change their business model. To go, hey, look, we're out of the. I mean, we're going to diminish our full custom process because we have to have this process over here to get the members of the fire service fire trucks quicker, because of these backlogs that are in every fire manufacturer. It's not like it's just one or two, all of them, just because of the amount of money that we received during COVID and how we were able to buy these fire apparatus. So it's now once again they've come up with this program truck, and then will it work for you? I mean, don't be so narrow-minded to go, it's not going to work. I have to have my full custom, and that's the only way it's going to work. I was talking to Chief Kelleher from DC just this week, and he goes, oh, man, it's going to kill me to do this, but I have to have fire trucks. And so we're going to buy something that's not we're going to look at something that's not our full custom to get it in less amount of time. And I think that's the manufacturers listening to all of us that are screaming, yelling, jumping up and down on social media, in person, on podcasts and everything, talking about this fire truck stuff that's going on, long delivery times and prices. This is their answer, and they're giving us an avenue. So be open to it. If it works for your fire department, it works for your municipality, works for your fleet, then, please do it. If it doesn't, then, all these manufacturers are still full custom builders. How well you've now planned out your replacement program, how well you've planned out, when your next purchase cycle is. And if you adjusted all that since this crisis in the fire service started with Apparatus, rather than just going, this is my plan, we're going to stick to it, have you adjusted to go, how am I going to keep my fleet in service and keep new fire trucks in there? So be open, and then, build a fire truck that works. That's the biggest thing. Flash, monstrosities, all-in-ones, unless you have to do that for your community, I think is a bad thing. And then just be open to, all these manufacturers that are out there. They're all there, and they're all trying to get us fire trucks quicker. None of them want to hear from us moaning, groaning, crying, and complaining about everything all the time. So they're trying to help us, but it is what it is.
But it's always okay to put a bell on. Just remember that. It's always okay to put a bell on the front of the fire truck. That's the Chris McCloon rule. So, well, Ricky, thank you very much for joining me today. We're gonna shift gears on our next Talking Trucks podcast. We're going to be talking about heavy rescues. That deviates a little bit from what we talked about today, because that is such a because that is such a mission-oriented type of vehicle, it does become a little bit more complex, and there are certain decisions that need to be made. So we'll be talking about that on the next one. Like I said before, if you do have any suggestions for topics you'd like us to hit on this podcast, let me know. I'm at chris.mcclune@clarionevents.com. And especially if there was something that we didn't hit on today that's a hot button for you, let us know. We can easily revisit this topic at any time. So if you are interested in seeing all of our podcasts, even the particularly this one, they are all archived at fireapparatus.com/podcast. We've upped the organization a little bit, so you can find all of them. All the talking trucks will be in one place. All of our moving water will be in one place. So we have gotten a little bit more organized, make it a little easier for you to find things. So again, this has been Chris McClune along with Ricky Riley, talking trucks today. Have a good one, everybody, and stay safe. Thanks again, Ricky. This episode is brought to you by Rescue Intelitech, innovating solutions to keep firefighters safe. Their Solo Rescue Decon Washer helps reduce cancer risks by cleaning contaminated gear quickly and effectively. Learn more at rescueintelitech.com, because clean gear saves lives.
At the Fire Store, you'll find everything but the truck, helmets, boots, turnout gear, and more that you can count on. Shop now at thefirestore.com.